Commander the Lax sat at the head of the council chamber, a smug expression plastered across his face. His race, the Valtorian Dominion, had spent centuries conquering planet after planet, leaving entire civilizations in ruins. Now Earth was the next on their list. It wasn't a challenge, it was barely even a task worth their attention. For the Lax, this would be another easy victory, another star added to his long list of conquests. The humans are weak, the Lax began, addressing the council with a wave of his hand. Their military capabilities are laughable. They barely have any spacefaring ships, and their ground forces are primitive at best. Advisor Crotol, standing by Thalax's side, nodded in agreement. Indeed, Commander. Our scouts report minimal resistance. Their defenses are outdated, their strategies predictable. Even their most advanced technology doesn't come close to what our most basic units can do. The other council members murmured their agreement. They had reviewed the data. Earth was a backwater planet, technologically behind, and completely unaware of the intergalactic power structure they were about to face. Conquering Earth wasn't a question of if but of when. The Lax leaned back in his chair, the dim lights of the council chamber reflecting off his scaled skin. He was confident, as he had been in every invasion before. The Dominion's forces were the pinnacle of military might in the galaxy, and Earth would fall just like all the others. The humans didn't even know what was coming. Why bother sending our elite forces? One of the council members asked, their voice filled with disdain. A small detachment should suffice. The Lax chuckled. I considered that, he replied. But I want this to be quick and decisive. There's no need to waste time on this insignificant rock. We send in the main fleet, overwhelm them in one strike, and by the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. The council murmured approval. The decision was made. Earth would face the full might of the Valtorian fleet, not because it deserved it, but because it would make the invasion easier and faster. The Lax stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Prepare the fleet, he commanded, turning to Crotol. We launch immediately. I want this done before the next rotation. Crotol saluted and began issuing orders. The fleet, consisting of thousands of ships equipped with the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, would descend on Earth like a storm. The Lax had no doubt that the humans would surrender within hours. They had no choice. As the fleet left the Council planet, the Lax spent the journey reviewing intercepted communications from Earth. The humans were completely unaware of the impending invasion. They were still bickering among themselves, focusing on internal disputes and conflicts, while oblivious to the alien threat just beyond their atmosphere. Crotol brought the Lax more reports as they traveled, all of them reinforcing the same narrative. Earth was divided, their military forces were spread thin, and their technology was archaic by galactic standards. The more the Lax read, the more he was convinced that this would be his easiest conquest yet. They're not even prepared for planetary defense, Crotol remarked, scrolling through the latest data on his holoscreen. Their most powerful weaponry seems to be nuclear, and even that is rudimentary. They rely on projectile-based systems. It's like stepping back in time. The Lax smirked. Primitive creatures stuck in their ways. They haven't evolved to understand real power. But soon they will. And they will fall like all the others. As they neared Earth's solar system, the Lax ordered the fleet into formation. The ships, vast and imposing, stretched across space like an endless wall of metal. They activated their cloaking fields, remaining invisible to the human satellites and sensors. The Lax didn't want them to see the fleet until it was too late. There was no reason to give them even a moment to prepare. Intercepted another human transmission, Crotol said, a note of amusement in his voice. They're holding some kind of military exercise, completely unaware that we're already here. They think they're preparing for internal threats. Fools, the Lax muttered. They're playing at war while the real battle is already at their doorstep. The fleet hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere, waiting for Thalax's command. It was almost time. The humans were still blissfully ignorant, their military completely unprepared for what was about to hit them. The Lax enjoyed the quiet before the storm, the moments just before his fleet would unleash their full power on an unsuspecting planet. He glanced at the tactical screen, which displayed Earth in real time. The major cities were highlighted, as were the military bases. The plan was simple: hit the key locations first, disable their communications, and then land ground troops to secure the planet. It had worked countless times before, and it would work now. "Are we ready?" Delax asked. Crowtall nodded. "The fleet is in position. We've targeted their primary military bases. Once we strike, their communications will be crippled. They won't be able to coordinate a defense." Delax allowed himself a rare smile. "Then let's begin." With a simple gesture, he gave the order. The fleet's weapons systems powered up, aimed directly at Earth's military installations. Missiles, energy beams, and plasma cannons charged, ready to unleash devastation upon the unsuspecting planet. It would be over before the humans even realized they were under attack. But then, something strange happened. As the fleet's targeting systems locked onto their targets, the tactical display flickered. An alert sounded, and suddenly, a new set of signals appeared on the screen, signals that hadn't been there moments before. "Commander," Crowtall said, his voice filled with confusion. "We're detecting something. There are energy signatures coming from the planet. But they weren't in the initial scans." Delax frowned, leaning forward to study the display. "What kind of signatures?" Crowtall shook his head. "I don't know. They're not like anything we've seen before. They're shielded, almost as if they're hidden from our scanners." Thalax's confidence wavered for the first time. He narrowed his eyes at the screen. "Activate a full scan. I want to know what's down there." The fleet's scanners swept the planet, searching for answers. The signals grew stronger, but still, the details remained obscured. It was as if something was deliberately hiding from them, something powerful enough to escape their notice until now. "What is this?" Delax muttered, his voice laced with irritation. "Why didn't we detect this earlier?" Crowtall's fingers danced over his console, trying to make sense of the readings. It's almost like there's a hidden force down there. A military force." Delax clenched his fists. "Impossible. The humans don't have that kind of technology." Yet, the signals were undeniable. Something was down there, something that hadn't been in their initial reports. And it was waiting for them. Captain Sarah Thompson stood before her battalion, her expression calm and focused. For years, the Ghost Battalion had been preparing for this moment. Every soldier in the room knew what was at stake, but none of them showed fear. They had trained under secrecy, their existence hidden even from Earth's own military. The world outside thought Earth was vulnerable, with outdated technology and fractured defenses. But Thompson knew the truth. Humanity had never been more ready. In the shadows of Earth's military hierarchy, General Marcus Alvarez had been the architect behind the Ghost Battalion's formation. Decades of planning and foresight had led them to this day. Alvarez had anticipated alien contact long before it became a reality, drawing from classified intelligence and covert surveillance. He saw the writing on the wall: Earth's defenses were a facade, a decoy to lull potential enemies into a false sense of security. Thompson recalled the countless briefings she'd attended over the years, where Alvarez outlined the true capabilities of the Ghost Battalion. Earth's public military was a smokescreen, primitive by design. Behind closed doors, however, the real advancements were being made. Electromagnetic disruptors capable of shorting out entire alien fleets, cloaked drones invisible to even the most sophisticated detection systems, and enhanced soldiers outfitted with experimental combat suits designed for situations exactly like this. Today was the culmination of that secrecy. Today, the aliens would see humanity's true strength. Thompson raised her hand, signaling for the room to fall silent. The soldiers snapped to attention, their faces hardened with determination. They didn't need a long speech. They understood the gravity of their mission. "We've been waiting for this," she said, her voice steady. "The enemy thinks we're weak. They think we're divided. Let them think that. We're going to show them what happens when they underestimate us." The soldiers didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Each one of them had been selected for their skill, discipline, and ability to operate under extreme pressure. They had been trained not just to fight, but to outthink and outmaneuver their enemies. The Ghost Battalion didn't fight battles, they won them before they began. As she walked through the room, Thompson checked in with her officers, making sure every detail of the operation was in place. They had received word that the alien fleet was hovering just outside Earth's atmosphere, their weapons systems locked on Earth's major military installations. The aliens believed they had humanity on the ropes. What they didn't know was that the Ghost Battalion was already in position, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the command center, General Alvarez monitored the situation closely. His eyes scanned the holographic map of Earth, which displayed the alien fleet's positions in real time. He could see their arrogance in their movements, the way they spread out their forces, leaving key gaps in their defenses. It was clear that they expected no real resistance. They were about to learn a harsh lesson. Alvarez keyed in a command, and the room's screens flickered to life with classified data. These were the tools that would turn the tide: cloaked drones, electromagnetic disruptors, and precision-guided missiles. All had been developed in secret, far from the eyes of the public and potential threats. Each one designed to counter alien technologies that far exceeded humanity's supposed capabilities. "We're green across the board." Thompson's voice crackled over the comms. "Ready on your mark." Alvarez nodded, his fingers hovering over the console. Timing was everything. If they struck too soon, they risked revealing their hand before the aliens fully committed. If they waited too long, Earth's civilian casualties could skyrocket. It was a delicate balance. He gave the signal. In an instant, the Ghost Battalion moved into action. Cloaked drones soared into the atmosphere, their movements invisible to the alien scanners. These drones carried electromagnetic pulse generators that, when detonated, would fry the alien fleet's electronics, leaving them vulnerable. On the ground, the battalion's missile units locked onto the alien ships, waiting for the pulses to hit. Thompson's team infiltrated the alien landing forces with precision. Her soldiers, outfitted in cloaked combat suits, moved silently through the enemy ranks. Their mission was clear: take out the command ships, cripple their coordination, and send the aliens into disarray. The aliens wouldn't even know what hit them. As the Ghost Battalion launched their assault, the first EMPs detonated. Alien ships powered down mid-flight, their systems shorted out by the pulses. Engines sputtered, weapons malfunctioned, and command signals went silent. The once coordinated invasion force now found itself adrift in confusion. Thompson led her team deeper into the heart of the alien landing party. Their cloaking devices kept them hidden from sight as they methodically targeted key personnel. One by one, the alien commanders fell, their troops left leaderless and scattered. The aliens, who had been so sure of their victory, now found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Back in the command center, Alvarez watched as the alien fleet's formation began to crumble. Ships collided in the confusion, their weapons still offline from the electromagnetic disruptors. What had once been a tightly coordinated attack now looked like a chaotic scramble. It was working. "Their main fleet is down to 60% operational capacity," an officer reported. "They're scrambling to restore systems, but it'll take time." Alvarez allowed himself a small smile. Time was on their side. The Ghost Battalion's strategy had always been about disruption, turning the enemy's strength against them. The more the aliens tried to recover, the more vulnerable they became. Thompson's team reached the core of the alien command ship. With precision, they planted charges on key structural points, ensuring that when the ship went down, it would take the rest of the fleet with it. They withdrew just as silently as they had arrived, leaving no trace of their presence until the moment the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the alien forces, sending shockwaves through their ranks. Their command ship was gone, their leaders dead or incapacitated. In the span of minutes, the invasion force that had once seemed invincible had been reduced to nothing. Thompson's voice came through the comms once more. "First wave neutralized. No casualties on our end." Alvarez didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. The Ghost Battalion had done what they were trained to do: eliminate the threat before it even fully materialized. The aliens had never stood a chance. On the alien flagship, Commander Thalax struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Moments ago, he had been preparing to celebrate his easy victory. Now, his fleet was in ruins, his landing forces annihilated. He stared at the flickering displays in disbelief. How had this happened? How had the humans, with their supposed primitive technology, completely destroyed his forces? But there was no time for answers. As the remnants of the alien fleet scrambled to retreat, Thalax knew one thing for certain: they had underestimated the humans. And it had cost them everything. Commander Thalax paced furiously aboard his flagship, his mind racing to make sense of the disaster that had unfolded. His forces, once so confident and poised for easy victory, were in disarray. Reports of ship malfunctions, ground forces obliterated, and command units neutralized filled his communication channels. He had never faced an enemy like this. The humans had outwitted him at every turn, and it was clear now that this wasn't a fluke. They were far more dangerous than he had imagined. Thalax slammed his fist against the console, silencing the chatter of his officers. He needed to regain control. He had underestimated them once. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. The humans' tactics were unconventional, but that didn't mean they couldn't be countered. He would adapt, regroup, and crush them, just as he had with every other species that dared to resist the Dominion. "Prepare to shift our tactics," Thalax commanded. "They're using guerrilla strategies. We need to rework our approach. Focus on overwhelming them with sheer numbers and firepower. They can't be everywhere at once." As the remaining alien forces began to reorganize, Thalax attempted to centralize their command structure. He was determined to push through the humans' resistance, confident that if he brought the full might of his fleet to bear, Earth's forces would eventually buckle. His initial arrogance had faded, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. But the humans were already one step ahead. Captain Sarah Thompson had been watching the alien forces closely, anticipating their next move. She understood that the aliens would try to rely on brute strength now, hoping to overwhelm the Ghost Battalion and conventional military forces. What the aliens didn't understand was that the Ghost Battalion thrived in situations where larger forces tried to press forward blindly. Their strength was in their ability to mislead, disrupt, and dismantle larger enemies piece by piece. Thompson devised a new plan. Rather than engage the alien forces directly, she would deploy her units in small, mobile teams. These teams would hit the aliens at their weakest points: supply lines, communications relays, and fuel depots. Every strike would be designed to create confusion and disorder within the alien ranks, preventing them from mounting a coordinated assault. The terrain of Earth worked in the humans' favor. Thompson knew the landscapes better than the invaders, and her teams used this knowledge to their advantage. Dense forests, deep valleys, and hidden bunkers provided perfect cover for ambushes. The alien forces, despite their technological superiority, were struggling to adapt. Their ships were too large and cumbersome to maneuver effectively through the terrain, and their ground forces, trained for direct confrontations, were ill-prepared for the hit-and-run tactics that the humans employed. One of Thompson's squads targeted an alien communications hub deep in the wilderness, cutting off key lines of communication between the remaining alien ships and their ground forces. Without the ability to coordinate, the aliens found themselves fighting isolated skirmishes, unable to call for reinforcements or share vital intelligence. Each human attack came without warning, striking from unexpected angles and vanishing before the aliens could retaliate. As the hours passed, reports flooded Thalax's command console. His forces were being stretched thin, forced to spread out to cover their dwindling supply routes and protect their command centers. But every time they repositioned, the humans struck elsewhere, using their agility to outmaneuver the larger, slower alien forces. Thalax's frustration mounted. His tactical advisors suggested regrouping the fleet and launching a full-scale orbital bombardment, but he knew that would be futile. The humans had hidden their true military strength too well. Launching an indiscriminate attack would risk collateral damage to his own troops still embedded on the planet's surface. The humans had turned the battlefield into a maze of deception, and he was stumbling blindly through it. Meanwhile, Captain Thompson continued to push her advantage. She issued new orders, directing her teams to target the alien fuel reserves. Without fuel, the alien ships would be forced to remain grounded, easy targets for the Ghost Battalion's next wave of attacks. Thompson's plan wasn't just to win battles. It was to wear the aliens down to the point where they could no longer continue the fight. She wasn't interested in engaging them head-on. She was dismantling their ability to wage war. Each successful mission further demoralized the alien forces. The once coordinated invasion had devolved into chaos. Soldiers who had once been assured of their superiority now found themselves on the defensive, watching for attacks from every direction, unable to predict where the humans would strike next. Reports from the ground indicated widespread panic among the alien ranks. Their supply lines were in shambles, their commanders were missing or dead, and their ships were running low on resources. The alien officers tried to regroup, but with each passing hour, their situation became more desperate. Thalax's attempts to adapt had only worsened the situation. The humans were too unpredictable, too fast, and too adaptable. Every new tactic the Lax employed was countered almost before it was deployed. It was as if the humans could read his mind, anticipating his every move. The Lax stared at the tactical map in disbelief. How had it come to this? His forces were the pride of the Dominion, feared across the galaxy, and yet here they were, being dismantled by a race he had dismissed as primitive and weak. The losses were mounting, and the longer the battle dragged on, the clearer it became that the humans were winning. In a desperate move, the Lax ordered his remaining forces to regroup for one final assault. He believed that if he could launch a massive, concentrated attack on Earth's main cities, the humans would be forced to surrender. Civilian casualties would be high, but it would break their will to fight. He prepared his ships for the strike, believing that if he could inflict enough damage in one decisive blow, he could still salvage the situation. What the Lax didn't realize was that Captain Thompson had already anticipated his desperation. She knew that with every failed strategy, the aliens would become more reckless, more willing to gamble everything on a last-ditch effort. Thompson had positioned her forces accordingly, ready to intercept the alien fleet before they could reach Earth's major population centers. The Lax gave the order. His ships began their approach, their weapons primed for the largest assault yet. But before they could initiate the attack, they were met with a barrage of countermeasures. Human drones, cloaked and undetected, had already infiltrated the alien fleet, disabling key systems and triggering widespread confusion. The aliens were blind, their targeting systems fried, their communications once again disrupted. In the command center, Thalax's vision blurred with fury. His last hope, his final assault, was unraveling before his eyes. The humans had predicted his every move, outmaneuvering him at every turn. He had no choice but to watch as his fleet, once invincible, was torn apart by an enemy he had never truly understood. As the remnants of his fleet began their retreat, the Lax knew that he had lost. Commander the Lax stood at the edge of the command deck, staring out into the abyss of space. His hands gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. His forces were in shambles, and the once mighty fleet that had promised swift victory now lay scattered, barely holding together. He had one final move, one last desperate attempt to break the humans before his forces were completely annihilated. He believed that if he could muster every remaining resource, every last ship and soldier, and direct it toward Earth's population centers, he could force a surrender. It was his only chance. His tactical advisors were silent. No one spoke of the defeats they had suffered, the humiliating losses to an enemy they had dismissed. All eyes were on him, waiting for the final command that would decide the fate of their invasion. The Lax wasn't sure if it was desperation or pride driving him now, but it didn't matter. This was his last shot. Prepare all available ships for a full-scale planetary bombardment, the Lax ordered, his voice strained. We strike at their cities, their civilian populations. We crush their will to fight. There were no objections. His officers carried out his commands mechanically, as if the outcome were already written. The Lax watched the tactical display as his fleet regrouped, forming up for what he hoped would be the decisive blow. But on Earth, General Marcus Alvarez had been preparing for this very moment. He had watched the alien fleet struggle, their tactics growing more desperate with each passing hour. Alvarez had allowed the aliens to believe they still had a chance, holding back the true extent of Earth's defenses. Now, with the final assault imminent, it was time to reveal humanity's hidden ace. Earth's defense grid had been a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. It was a last resort system, capable of creating a planetary shield and unleashing advanced, automated weaponry that could turn the tide of any invasion. For years, Alvarez had kept it in reserve, waiting for the right moment to activate it. That moment had come. In the war room, Alvarez stood before the central console, his fingers poised above the activation switch. Captain Thompson stood by his side, her face impassive but her eyes sharp, ready for whatever came next. The Ghost Battalion had done their job, weakening the alien forces and destabilizing their command structure. Now, it was time for Earth's final defense. "We've held them off long enough," Alvarez said quietly. "Let's end this." He pressed the switch, and Earth's true defense system came to life. Across the planet, massive energy fields shimmered into existence, encasing Earth in a protective shield that nullified the alien fleet's incoming weapons. The alien ships, already battered and disorganized, found their energy weapons deflected and their missile systems rendered useless. Simultaneously, hidden weapon platforms that had been dormant for years emerged from beneath the planet's surface, targeting the alien fleet with pinpoint precision. Plasma cannons and electromagnetic railguns fired in unison, ripping through the alien ships with devastating accuracy. The Lax watched in horror as ship after ship exploded on his tactical display. His final assault had barely begun, and already it was being torn apart by a defense system he hadn't even known existed. "How?" the Lax muttered, his voice hollow. "How did they?" But it wasn't just the planetary defenses that were dismantling his forces. On the ground, Captain Thompson and the Ghost Battalion launched their final offensive. Using the chaos caused by the defense grid, Thompson's forces infiltrated the alien command center that had been set up on Earth's surface. The remaining alien officers were caught off guard, their forces already weakened and disorganized from the previous engagements. Thompson led the charge personally, her battalion moving with lethal efficiency. They targeted key alien officers, disabling communications and severing the last remnants of command and control. The aliens, already struggling to regroup, fell quickly, their lines collapsing under the Ghost Battalion's assault. Within hours, the command center was neutralized, and the aliens were left with no one to lead them. Thalax's desperation turned to disbelief as he watched his fleet disintegrate. His last hope, the final push he had counted on, was unraveling before his eyes. He had underestimated the humans at every turn. He had thought them weak, primitive, and divided. Now, as his empire's finest ships were reduced to burning wreckage, he realized the depth of his miscalculation. In the final moments of the battle, as the last of his ships were destroyed and the ground forces were overwhelmed, the Lax understood the bitter truth. The humans had been prepared for this invasion all along. They had hidden their strength, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true power. His arrogance had blinded him to the reality of what they were capable of, and now his empire would pay the price. As his flagship systems began to fail, alarms blaring and fires breaking out across the deck, the Lax sank into his chair. He had lost. The invasion had failed, and his name would be remembered not as a conqueror, but as the fool who led the Dominion into disaster. His officers scrambled around him, trying in vain to restore order, but it was too late. The battle was over. On the ground, Captain Thompson and her battalion swept through the remains of the alien command center, securing the last of the alien forces. It was a decisive victory, one that would echo through the galaxy. As Thompson received word of the alien fleet's total collapse, she knew that this war had sent a message: Earth was not a target to be taken lightly. In the aftermath, General Alvarez and Captain Thompson stood together in the war room, watching the final reports come in. The alien forces were retreating, what few ships remained fleeing back to the edges of the solar system. Earth had not only survived, but it had delivered a crushing defeat to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Alvarez turned to Thompson, a rare smile on his face. "We've done more than just defend Earth today. We've changed the way the galaxy sees us." Thompson nodded, her expression calm but resolute. "They won't make the same mistake again." The debriefing was brief, the details of the battle already clear. Humanity had shown its true strength, and the message was undeniable: Earth was not to be trifled with. The Galactic Dominion, once so confident in its superiority, had been humbled. Thalax's defeat would be remembered as the moment when humanity proved itself as a force to be reckoned with. As the reports of victory spread, the galaxy began to take notice. Earth was no longer seen as weak or primitive. It was a planet that had faced the might of the Dominion and emerged victorious. And from that day forward, no one would dare underestimate humanity again.